We all want to know who we are and where do we come from. Our ancestors, who were they? How can we find out?
My name is Neal Dewey. My wife and I from Smithfield, Utah, are living in Malmö, Sweden right now, serving as missionaries for 1 year, and we're thrilled to be here. I served here 50 years ago almost as a young missionary. So to come back to Sweden and be among the Swedish people and in this beautiful country is a dream come true. And my ancestors come from here as well, so we're just thrilled to be here.
My name's Loreita Dewey, and I am married to Neal Dewey, and together we're serving a mission right now in the Sweden Stockholm mission. The mission president called us one day and said, "I'm trying to decide where to send you. And there's a chance of sending you to," I have 3 options. One is Stockholm, one is up north, and one is down south in a place called Malmö. And when he said the word Malmö, that just made my heart so excited. And he said, "Do you have any feelings one way or another?" And I said, "Well, for some reason when you said that one of the choices was Malmö, Sweden, my heart just got so excited." So he goes, "Okay, well, we'll think about it and I'll let you know where you're going." Well, now that we're here in Malmö serving, we're so excited about being so close to Copenhagen, Denmark, and the fact that my last name growing up, my maiden name, was Hansen, and my relatives come from Copenhagen, Denmark. I didn't know anything about my relatives, and so I was hoping so bad that I would have the chance while I'm here in Sweden to maybe go across the bridge and visit Copenhagen and just learn something about those first members of the church. My ancestors that were the first ones to join the church in Copenhagen, Denmark. That was my hope.
Coming so close to her forefathers' land inspires Loreita to delve deeper into their stories.
Peter Nils Hansen and his wife Marie Jensen are my great-grandparents on my father's side. And I'm so grateful to the people that, my relatives who attached stories on Family Search to these people so that I could read about their family histories. One of the stories went like this, talking about Peter Nils's family. He said that his father died. Peter Nils's father died in 1853, and his mother, Inger, and his siblings joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints 2 years later in 1855. And shortly thereafter, they came to America, arriving early in 1856. Peter Nils's family went right to Iowa, joining the saints there. to start across the plains, and they traveled from Iowa to Florence, Nebraska, a distance of 300 miles, with handcarts in the last handcart company. At Florence, Nebraska, Peter Nils's mother and his elder sister Christine died in 1857. And Peter Nils was unmarried and 23 years old, and together with his sisters Anna, 20 years old, Bertha was 17 years old, and Inger, his youngest sister, was 11 years old. They crossed the plains to Utah. In the early part of 1862, Peter Nils with others, he was called to take their ox teams and go to far west and meet a party of immigrants. It was on this trip that Peter Nils met his future wife, Marie Jensen, who was my great-grandmother. Marie was the eldest of 11 children, and her family also lived in Denmark. Marie's parents married in 1836, and Marie's father joined the church in 1851. One of the first group of people to join the church in Denmark. It had been illegal just a few years before that, and then there was a law passed where people could join other religions, and so the missionaries were sent to Denmark, and he was one of the first group of people to be taught and join the church.
Loreita's ancestors, Peter and Marie, were baptized into the church during its earliest days in Denmark. This was a formative period, as the church was only beginning to organize its first branches in the country. The lives of the early converts were often marked by severe opposition and hardship, as they remained steadfast in their newfound faith amidst widespread resistance. In June 1850, Erastus arrived in Copenhagen and established a new mission. He was joined in this effort by Jan Erik Forsgren, a Swede, and Peter Olsen Hansen, a Dane. Together they laid the foundation for the church's early work in Scandinavia. In December 15th, 1851, Erastus wrote, "To embrace the gospel is almost equal to the sacrifice of one's life. And to travel and preach it, a man carries his life in his hands." A mob burned down the cottage of tailor Jacob Bond, crying, "Let's baptize the Mormon priest in his own blood." Bond, searching the ruins of his home, praised God that his journal containing 50 hymns he had written concerning the restoration had not been destroyed.
I have gained such an appreciation for them as people. They were hardworking farmers, just wonderful people who, when they heard the gospel, they accepted it readily and were willing to sacrifice everything for it, to follow Jesus Christ. To hear their stories and the hardships that they went through and the price that they paid to be a member of the church at a time when it was so new and culturally it wasn't acceptable. It really touches my heart that they were willing to sacrifice so much. And then there's stories about coming over on the ship and how hard that journey was, and then some people passed away on the ship, And then when they got here and came across with handcart companies, and then got to winter quarters where my great-grandfather's mother and oldest sister passed away, that just really touched my heart. And I could imagine how difficult that was for them.
Loreita returns to the soil of her forefathers, where the echoes of history still linger.
So my heart is just filled with gratitude for my relatives, and I feel like I'm starting to get to know them for the first time, the ones from Denmark. Get to know who they were, what was important to them, why I am the way I am. I have a lot of the characteristics of some of those relatives that I read about. Like, they love farming, and they loved creating things with their hands, making their own clothing, raising animals. They loved raising flowers. I read that my great-grandmother loved to have lilac bushes and rose bushes. And at my house in Smithfield, Utah, where I live, I have a lilac bush and a rose garden. So I thought, we have something in common.
It is a very powerful thing to walk on the very same land as your ancestors. The history becomes more real.
I've always been interested in family history, even before we were married. I was just captivated by studying generations and going back and seeing who my ancestors were. When we came to Sweden, I think I had two goals in mind as it related to family history. One was to try to answer some previously unknown questions that we had as far as whose father was who and who was married to who, and try to discover some names and people that we had been unsuccessful with. And so far we've been able to do that to a degree. We've been able to find some previous dead ends and take them back another generation. And so that's been very exciting. The other thing I wanted to do as far as family history goes was to become more acquainted with my ancestors that I already knew lived here in Sweden. We have some from Lund, we have some from Vebberöd, and a little town called Dörröd, just outside of Vebberöd. And when we got here, one of the first things we did was go to the old church in Vebberöd, which I think is from the 1200s. We met the church watch person there. She opened up the church and took us in, gave us a little tour, and explained some things such as the baptismal basin there is from the 1200s. And the tiles on the floor, some of them are original tiles dating back to that time as well. Even the front bench of the pews is an original one. So we're thinking, my wife and I, as we look at these artifacts, if you will, they're kind of artifacts to us in the church, and thinking, you know what, my ancestors stood in this very church. This is where they lived, was in this town. They came here for their christenings, and we looked at that baptismal basin and realized my great-great-grandmother was actually baptized in that very basin. My ancestors, I've got 3 or 4 generations of ancestors that lived in this area. This would have been their church. This would have been where they were christened. And so it's neat to come into this building and just feel the spirit that is here and the closeness of those relatives, realizing that they walked on these very steps, that they were here, they were surrounding this baptismal basin as their children were christened. And it's just a wonderful feeling to know that this was a part of their lives and that we could be here and share in this environment and just feel the reverence, I guess, and the closeness to those relatives. I'm looking at my family tree right now, and I just wanted to explain a little bit about who's who on this. My parents are Wade Dewey and Lorna Nyman. And going back on my mother's side, we get into the Swedish genealogy here. You can see on this fan chart, the colors indicate the country where the person was born. So we go back here and you can see this color, kind of a light orange. These are all Swedish ancestors. And the darker color, orange, is Norwegian. So my mother, Lorna Nyman, her parents were Andrew Nyman and Desi Thurston. They were both born in the United States. I didn't know either of them. They both passed away before I was born. Andrew's parents, you can see, were born both in Sweden. So you've got Carl Nyman. He comes from Falun, which is, I think, just a little bit north of Stockholm. Albertina Axelina Loving was born in Lund. So she's down here in the area where we're currently living. Interesting thing about Albertina, she always told people her father's name was Andreas Loving. We've never been able to find any documentation on an Andreas Loving or anything similar to that in the Lund area during the time when Albertina was born. But she stood by that story that that's who her father was. Albertina's mother was Benta Hansdotter. Benta was born in Veberöd, in a little community, or maybe just a little houses or two, town called Dörröd, just outside of Veberöd. Benta was born in 1823, and again, there was no marriage between her parents. Her father was this Ahmed Hansen, who is from Norway. He was a Norwegian, born Norwegian, serving in the Crown Prince cavalry. He was a horseman in that cavalry. Benta's mother, Anna Månsdotter, was from Veberöd, and Anna, Benta's mother, died when Benta was only 8 years old, leaving Benta without parents. Benta was raised by an aunt until Benta was in her mid-teens, and at that time she moved to Lund and spent most of her adult years in Lund. Benta had 5 or 6 children while she lived in Lund. Again, there's no record of any marriage or parents of those, or who the father was of those children. When Benta was, in 1861, Benta joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A couple of years later, her children were baptized as members of that church, and eventually they all came or immigrated to the United States. Benta sent several of her children ahead of her. I don't suppose they had the money to be able to afford all of them coming over to the United States at the same time, so they came over a little bit at a time. Albertina came, I believe, in 1863. And there is a touching story of when she left her mom and came to America. It says in a history that we have, Albertina's mother Benta and her sisters went to the pier to bid her, Albertina, farewell. It was a touching scene with tears in their eyes and a promise of, "We hope to see you in a year or two." Just then a large mob gathered to take the mother before a magistrate for sending her daughter to Utah to be mistreated and hitched to a plow. She, the mother, got away, however, and nothing happened. Albertina traveled with a neighbor going to America. The neighbor's name was a Mrs. Celia Swenson. And so they came to America. Albertina was placed, when she got to America and got to Utah, with one of the wives of Heber C. Kimball. I believe it was Christine Kimball that Albertina lived with. And Benta came over later. I think it was 1869 when Benta finally came.
He begins searching for answers to all questions, wondering, for instance, whether the family tree has been accurately recorded. He finds out a mistake has been made. When adding the record of the family Lars Bengtsson and Anna Persdotter, for some reason the family had been mixed up with another family on a completely another location in Sweden. Neal gets help on the local archive in Lund. He finds the right Lars and Anna. And with that discovery, another lineage of ancestors. As Neal gets closer and closer to his family roots, he discovers the location of the farm of Tuve Månsson and what kind of farm it was. It was a farm in Swedish called Rusthåll. It was a farm just like the one behind me. A special type of farm that received tax relief in exchange for equipping and maintaining a cavalry soldier and his horse for the service of the crown. With each discovery, Neal gains a deeper understanding of the lives and circumstances of his ancestors, bringing history to life in a personal and meaningful way. During the 1600s, Sweden was at war for 52 out of 100 years. Sweden's status as a military state was characterized by a highly organized system that blended agriculture and conscription, creating a society deeply connected to warfare. Farms with the label Rusthåll were literal building blocks of Sweden's military might, and Neal's ancestors were a great part of that military organization at that time.
Well, so today in the temple, we were able to do the sealings for some of my ancestors. This is my 5th great-grandmother and my 5th great-grandfather, Anna Persdotter and Tuve Månsson. She was actually married previously to a Lars Bengtsson, and he passed away and she remarried. So we found in doing the genealogy that there was a Anna Persdotter and a Lars Bengtsson in the city of Farholt, 100 miles away from here. And in family search, they had intertwined those couples and their children. And so we had to sort through and get the right couples matched up with the right children. And so today we were able to do that here in the Denmark temple. And so we had Anna Persdotter and Lars Bengtsson sealed and their son Bengt. And then we had Anna Parsdotter and Tufa Monson sealed, and their 5 children to them. So it was a wonderful day in the temple.
I can feel how our ancestors from the other side of the veil say, "Tell our stories." Our journeys are stories about faith and sacrifices. Learn from them. This video is produced by Good Hope Media, and we will keep tell these stories. But it requires resources, so we ask for your help. If you like these videos, you are very welcome to make a donation. You can find a link to our donation service in the description below, or visit our web page goodhopemedia.org/donation.